Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Hi, my name's Neil. Thank you so much for coming to the second ever Glitch. I'm quite excited that we've got nearly a full house. I think one or two people dropped off because of the lurgy. Who has like some sort of head cold or flu, or if their face is about to fall off feeling right now? This guy knows. Yeah. Well, I think a few have dropped off like that. But I'm so glad that if you do feel crap and you're still here, that's great. I'm really pleased because it's going to be really good. The second ever Glitch. It's really, we had such a great response the first time around, and it's nice to have an event that people kind of respond to, which isn't all about networking and business cards and this, that, the other. It's about just having great people together, nice people, good company, and interesting speakers, and free beer. Well, one free beer. It's enough for some people. But yeah, it's. I think tonight's going to be excellent. We've got a fantastic speaker. Pete is an old associate of mine, old as in 2.5 years. That's quite a long time in my books. But he's a coach, he's a writer, and he's got bags of experience with creative industries and creative practitioners, and he really does know what he's talking about. I know that because he's helped my business as well. He's done some coaching with me, and he's transformed my business from just 2 people to 9 people. His advice took me to where it needed to be. So I know that every word in his book is going to be taken from a place of experience and authenticity. So I encourage you. I've asked him to bring a few along tonight. There's an ebook as well, but there are a few actual physical copies as well. So if you like what he says in the talk, I would encourage you to get involved as well. Thank you endlessly to sponsors tonight as well. There's Jigsaw 24 who are here somewhere. I know that they were there last time, and another there again. Anything Mac, anything Adobe, anything to do with creative tech and software and solutions, Jigsaw 24 are literally amazing. And they're based in Nottingham as well. So definitely check them out. Also sponsors, endless thanks to Affinity as well, who a brilliant set of packages for both photo editing and designers and anything. Really amazing pack of software there. So I encourage you to check Affinity out as well. And Fat Free Media, which happens to be my business, by the way. Any sort of video, the creative video, that's what's kind of brought Glitch here. So certainly check that out as well. But I won't talk too much about my stuff. Tiny bit of housekeeping before I bring Pete on. If you need a wee, there's a door at the back. Don't just do it in the door, that'd be weird. Go through the door and then go into a little room called the toilet. It's just back there. Don't do that because Pete will freak out. And I said if anyone jumps on the stage, he can wrestle you. So you can take that risk if you want. Anyway, before I disappear because I talked about we, I'll just like to introduce Pete. Before I go, by the way, after the talk, if you want to go upstairs, there'll be food, there'll be snacks, there'll be drinking and chatting for the rest of the evening. So please don't disappear, pop upstairs, and I'm sure Pete might stick around as well if you want to chat to him as well. So anyway, put your hands together, please, and welcome Pete Mosley.
Thanks, Neil. Ooh, okay. Spots in front of the eyes. Okay, is the sound level all right for everyone? That's cool. Great. Yep, my name's Pete Mosley. I've come to talk tonight, and shall we switch this slidey thing over to get this presentation? Fantastic, right. The Art of Shouting Quietly is the core of this talk tonight. It's a book I wrote last year, and it was published in April, courtesy of a crowdfunding campaign that saw it being sold in 15 countries around the world. The book ostensibly is about self-promotion for introverts and other quiet souls. It's not strictly for introverts, and a lot of it applies to extroverts too, but I find in my work with creative businesses, there's an awful lot of the folk that I work with are quite quiet, absolutely brilliant at what they do, but not that great at pushing themselves forward. And this just kept recurring so often in my coaching work and my business advice work, that I decided I wanted to start writing stuff about that, and that developed into the book. Before we begin talking about the book, really, I think it's important that I just spend a couple of minutes talking about where I've come from and how I've come to this place. One of the most interesting things that I find about working with creative people is they have kind of cyclical careers, and creative folk try out a huge number of different things really throughout their careers and often end up in places they never imagined they would do at the outset. Interesting journeys. So imagine this, if you will, a small boy growing up in Glasgow. I was quite a shy kid, not bold like other kids were. I had a couple of childhood illnesses, one of which nearly killed me, and another which was very painful and very recurrent, and it kind of pulled the rug out from underneath my feet. I was left really unconfident as a young lad and had lots of doubts floating around in my mind. I'm sure some of you recognize some of these thoughts. I'll be found out. I'm a bit of a fraud. I'm an upstart. You know, that kind of bewilderment with the world. So in that sense, I didn't get off to a very good start. But by the time I was 18, I thought I was a rock god. I went to college and joined a band, as you did in the 70s. I went to college in 1973, and it was just the natural thing to do, to go enjoy a rock band. I had hair down to the small of my back, white boiler suit with stenciled stuff all over it, silver platform-soled shoes. And the band were quite successful. We produced a single, we went on tour, supported an awful lot of other well-known bands, including the Bay City Rollers and Mud and various other glitter-style bands at the time. It was really, really exciting. Melody Maker said it was a hit, the single. New Musical Express called us a bunch of artless dorks playing retarded jug band music. I have to say that I'm with the New Musical Express in hindsight. It wasn't very good. But it was fabulously exciting, and you know, I thought I was just the bee's knees, and that's interesting. Why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you this because a lot of the underpinnings of the book are really about confidence. And that wasn't, of course, it wasn't confidence, that was just youthful arrogance, as I found out later on. I began to learn the difference. But confidence is a mercurial quality, isn't it? You have it 1 minute, and then it kind of slips away from you, and then it comes back in a different form, and it's almost like we all need our own brand of confidence. You need to find a place where you can shine, a place where you can really perform well in the world. By the time I was 30, I was a professional juggler. I won't fill in the gap, but believe me, I was. And I'd put together a 45-minute one-man show that I toured around schools and hospitals and prisons and community centres. And the show was really about, I'd learned these skills, I'd learned how to juggle. It was the first physical thing that I was ever really good at. And I learned how to ride a unicycle and walk on stilts and all of that stuff. And I thought I'll put a show together from this because it's an ideal way of working with other people that aren't very confident and get them to build their confidence up as well. And it really, really worked, you know, and it employed me gainfully for a number of years. I couldn't do all of these things all at once, you know, but that's how the kids kind of saw me. And there's a bit more of a story to go with the circus stuff that I'll elaborate on later on. That kind of brings me up to date, really. So I wear 3 hats. I'm business editor of Craft and Design magazine, which sounds very grand, but really I write articles for them and I look after stuff for some of their website content. I write books, but I also blog a lot and write for some fairly prominent cultural creative industries websites. And I coach creative people. My definition of creativity is incredibly broad. If you've got an idea in your head and you want to make a business out of it, by definition, I think you're a creative person. It doesn't matter whether it's a tech business or whatever. Just having the wherewithal to create something out of nothing, massively creative act. So I've been coaching a vet recently, and this vet does hip replacements on dogs. That's creative, isn't it? Fantastic thing to do. I always do that when I say hip replacements on dogs. I'm never quite sure why. I coached a Roman Catholic hermit who was a calligrapher, and all she wanted to do was do her calligraphy in the service of God. She didn't want to earn very much money from it. Is that creative? Fantastic, yeah. And I coached a bed maker who was, you know, making about £2 million a year, And he made white leather beds 6 foot wide with stereos in the headboard and televisions that kind of popped up out the end when you wanted to watch the telly in bed. Fantastic stuff. So I get to work with all of these incredible people. So this is just some of the people around Craft and Design. My Creative Choices, have any of you come across the Creative Choices website? It's an astonishing resource for people starting up creative businesses. They've got about 100 authors on there writing really cool stuff about creative business. Cockpit Arts is a business incubator in London. And I also write for Cape Craft and Design Institute, which is a bit like the Crafts Council, but based in Cape Town in South Africa. And I've already made reference to these books that I've written. I also work closely with my partner, Janet, and we run this thing called the refectory table. The refectory table is a thing, actually. It's a big refectory table in our house, and we gather folk round. We decided ages ago, after both of us had been working with Arts Council and in the public sector for a long time, that we hated training in corporate environments. So what we did was we started training people in the comfort of our own home and feeding them really nicely. Food works a treat in bonding people and bringing them together around learning. And the whole premise of the thing is bringing folk together in a different way. And the folk that come to our courses, not only do they keep coming back, but they travel tremendous distances to come to us. Women came on Saturday from Manchester with her 14-year-old daughter all the way to Loughborough just to attend one of our courses. And the folks stick together afterwards. They stay in touch with each other. And I think when you're a quiet person, building a really powerful network of people around you is a great thing to do. It can solve a lot of problems for you. I'll talk a little bit more about it later on. The refectory table is not just the table, it's also a concept, and we take it to lots of other places. This is a beautiful old water tower in Northamptonshire, and we run some courses there, and you can see just the sense of community that we create around the training that we do. Fabulous food, people having a fabulous time, and learning business skills, creative business skills at the same time. So I'm beginning to talk about collaborations, and that I'll return to throughout the talk. So over the years, we built up working relationships with all of these organizations and more. And I think, again, if you're a quiet person, the nature and quality of the collaborations that you build up for yourself over the years can really sustain your business, because you've got other people out there that you can rely on, and other people that can boomerang information out and help you with your marketing, so you don't have to stick your head too far above the parapet. And when I was doing the crowdfunding for the book, all of these people with all of their massive social media followings were right behind me and pushed the information out that made the crowdfunding campaign a real success. So I've been self-employed now since 1984. The first 10 years that I ran my business, there was no internet. Interesting. I had to print leaflets and put them in envelopes and stick stamps on them and take them down the post office and put them in the slot, and managed to do fairly well with that. But I've ended up having hundreds of conversations with people developing their own small creative businesses. And you learn a phenomenal amount from doing that. You learn what really succeeds for people and what doesn't work for people. And there are patterns emerge, certain things that people do in their creative businesses that really mark out the difference between whether their business is sustainable and is a success, or whether it kind of goes west. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But everything I'm going to share with you tonight is really born out of this experience. It's real practical experience of working with creative people, rather than simply theory coming out of a book or marketing training or whatever. Interesting. So the first question, really, if you want to be successful in your business, is this. You need the answer to this question: what does success really mean to you? And it's different for everyone. Not everybody just thinks in terms of money. So if I go back to the 3 examples that I gave you, the vet was sent to me for coaching because his boss wanted him to be a director and partner in the company. This poor bloke, all he wanted to do was do his hip replacements on dogs. He just wanted to be the best vet he could be. And he travels around the world learning his trade. He does stuff with horses and racehorses and cats and hedgehogs and other stuff as well. But he just really, really wanted to do that stuff and do it well. Is that success? Absolutely. He wasn't interested in the status. He wasn't interested in the money. He just wanted to be a better and better orthopedic surgeon for animals. The Roman Catholic hermit, when I worked with her, and it was some time ago now, she only wanted £2,000 a year because she lived in a tied cottage that was tied to the church. She had a huge allotment out of the back where she could grow all her own vegetables, and she just wanted to be left in peace and quiet to practice her art. Is that success? Absolutely. I can't make any argument with that at all. And the bed maker, multi-millionaire bed maker, just wanted to make as much cash as he possibly could in the shortest space of time, sell the business, and spend the rest of his life having a good time with his family. Is that success? Fine. But the thing is to understand what success is for you on your own terms. It makes it much, much easier to grow and develop your business if you know where your business really connects to the core of you. Interesting. So it's about being yourself, really, not what other people want or tell you to be. And embracing your non-conformity. I think as a creative person, you've got this huge advantage of being really different. And we're pushed all of our lives to conform and be the same as other people and to market ourselves in the same way and follow the same rules. And actually, that's not the thing that works. It's about finding out what the difference is for you and capitalizing that and really pushing that in order to be successful in your work. So it's about really avoiding other people's stereotypes of successful behavior and about really determining what's best for you. And this works whether you're a quiet person or an extrovert or wherever you are in that kind of continuum. But we do get told an awful lot in our lives as we grow up what we ought to be doing, pushed in all sorts of different directions, don't we? I like to think of it in these terms. We've all got this internal management committee, haven't we? You know, people sitting on our shoulders, advising us quietly. My dad died 30 years ago, but there's never a decision I make in life that doesn't have him somewhere in the calculation, you know. For some folk, it might be the dog. You know, if you think about the floods in 2014, lots of people would stay in their house because they didn't want to abandon their pet. The influence of that relationship was so strong that they'd remain in a place of danger rather than do the logical thing. We're all governed by all these influences around us. And that can make it very difficult sometimes to really plough your own furrow. So it's worth just thinking about. We're constantly berated by people for working in the creative industries. Is that a proper job? How will you ever make any money out of that? Why don't you become a doctor? Why don't you marry a doctor? You know, all of these funny solutions that people come up with. But it's generally their anxiety about you and your welfare. And once you get attuned to that, it makes life much easier, doesn't it? I believe that we've all got this seed of something. We're all born with this seed of something inside us. And if the seed gets light, and it gets nurture, and it gets warmth, and it gets nutrients, we grow kind of straight and strong. We put down good roots, and we become who we ought to be in the world. But if the seed doesn't get light, if it doesn't get nurtured, we kind of grow a bit strange and off balance, really. And it doesn't take much, does it? You know, a bad teacher can do it, or an overbearing parent, or childhood illness or something like that. It doesn't take much to knock you off course. And a lot of the folk that I work with in their 30s and 40s, aiming to start creative businesses, have hit this point of recognizing that they've got this seed that they were knocked off course from early in their lives, and they want to get back on track to find what the seed was and to regenerate back from that original source again. It's just worth thinking about, you know, are you on the right track? Have you been knocked off course? So back to this theme of, sorry about that, back to this theme of confidence again, and back to the theme of quiet people. In my coaching work, I'm constantly encouraging people to get through the barrier of fear. If we take public speaking as an example, I know a lot of really experienced public speakers, they will all admit to being fairly terrified. You don't tend to banish the fear. What you do is you become better friends with it. And you become better friends with it by getting out into your stretch zone a little bit at a time, feeling the exhilaration that comes with doing that risky thing. And your comfort zone expands. But then your duty really is to get back out into the edges again and keep exploring and keep pushing. If you don't spend some time every day playing around in your comfort zone, in your stretch zone, you're not really pushing yourselves, are you? You're not really developing in the way that you really ought to be. It's interesting. The other big confidence booster I find when I'm working with quieter people is this thing about remembering and giving yourself credit for all the really great experiences that you've had in the past. We move through our working lives and leave this trail of successful, great stuff behind us, and we forget about it. So whenever we approach a fresh challenge, it's almost as if we're approaching the challenge anew. So just taking some time out now and again to track all of the brilliant stuff you've done over the past years, really valuable thing to do. I do this exercise, actually. I encourage people to draw a timeline that stretches back into the past, and then just to think through it and pick out, like Big Brother's best bits, pick out all the stuff that's really relevant, stuff that you can bring forward back into your working life and really work with in a fruitful way. Kind of takes me back to the juggling, really. I couldn't do this if I hadn't been a juggler, you know. It was that broke me through my lack of confidence and allowed me to get out in front of people. And we all have those kind of key experiences that we leave behind us. It's worth just looking back and checking from time to time. This is phenomenally important. In the UK, I think us Brits are not very good at asking for help. We're given loads of help when we start up, you know, all that advice and support that we get. But as your business matures, it's almost like you forget to ask for help, or you think somehow it's a sign of weakness. Asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a statement of courage. It's a statement of integrity. It's a statement of a willingness to grow and move on. The funny thing is, when people see you expressing that willingness, they step forward. Loads of people are willing to help. You know, of all the people I've ever asked for help across my career, 1 out of 10 might have said no. Most people are willing to help if you really need it. If you think about it, you know, I read in Forbes magazine a couple of months ago, Richard Branson at any given time has got 10 paid advisors working, and they're all working on things that he knows he's crap at. You know, he completely understands that he can't be good at everything. All politicians have got paid advisors for exactly the same reason. Why don't we step up and say, I need help from time to time? It's a really powerful thing to do. You know, if you get stuck with something, don't be shy about asking for help. So it's about asking for help not just at the beginning, but regularly through your career. You know, I wrote my first book when I was 57. I never imagined that I'd ever write a book, and I got stuck with it. And there was one guy I knew that was some way down the road in front of me, and I knew he could help. He was another prominent business coach. And I wrote him an email and said, do you think you can help me with this? I'm really, really stuck. I'm publishing this book, or just about to. And I got an email back from him and said, yes, Skype me. And I Skyped him. And he spent about 40 minutes with me just talking through all the points I had real doubts about. It was only later on I found out that he was on holiday in Japan at the time. Isn't that phenomenal? And I constantly find people just willing to step forward. Why? Because somebody else has done it for them at some point during their career. They understand the power of a good leg up. It's fantastically powerful stuff, asking for help. I just want to ask a quick question. How many of you, hands up, if you think of yourself as an expert in your field? Wow. Okay, that's a fairly typical response, I have to say. Expertise is a relative thing, isn't it? When I was 11, I'd got a mate who was 12, and he played the guitar, and he could play the whole of Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven really fluently. To me, he was the world expert in guitar playing. He knew more than I ever needed to know about playing guitar at that point in time. After Einstein had done the theory of relativity, he was still looking up to people as experts in his field. And we've all got people that we look up to and people that we know are kind of following us up this ladder. But it's really important to acknowledge your expertise and grasp that, and to really let people know about what your expertise is, to put it out there, because you have it, relatively speaking. As long as you're not saying you can do things that you can't, it doesn't matter. If you learn, it's almost as if you've got a duty to pass information back on. That's what makes the world go round. So, grasp your expertise and put it out there. Interesting. We've all been trained to do elevator. Who's been trained or taught or at least told they should do an elevator pitch? Yeah, 2 minutes. You've got 2 minutes to impress the boss. They terrify me. I don't understand, really. I'd much rather listen to somebody speaking unconfidently but from the heart, telling me like it really is, telling their story to me, than listen to some highly polished elevator pitch that's shallow and meaningless. And a lot of people get held back from the notion of public speaking or attempting to pitch by this notion that it has to be really polished, and if they haven't got their 2-minute elevator pitch off pat, then they really shouldn't be going there. It's about storytelling. I'm going to talk a little bit more about storytelling, but don't get stuck with the elevator pitch. So it's about not battling with your fears, but observing them. When you're in situations where you're feeling anxious or feeling nervous, you're probably feeling anxious or nervous for a really good reason. And you don't banish fear, you just become more and more attuned to working with it, And once you get your head around that concept, it makes a lot of very difficult things much easier, because you're not trying to do something that's in fact impossible, which is to get rid of the fear absolutely and entirely. I want to talk a little bit about networking now, because quiet people often struggle with networking an awful lot. Who likes going to networking meetings here? Okay. Yeah, dreadful. You usually find me in the corner checking my mobile phone, looking at the posters. If you don't like networking meetings, don't go to them. You don't have to. There's other ways to do this stuff. And if you do go to networking meetings, I adopt a completely reverse tactic, because you're taught to go there and hand out your business cards and tell people what you do and do the elevator pitch, aren't you? And I don't do that. I go and I just listen. I'll go to somebody that I kind of instinctively like the look of and ask them really interesting questions and just see what they say back. And I'll do that with a few people at each networking session. And then I go away home and I think about all the people that I've spoken to. And then if I want to, I get back in touch with them. But what I don't do is feel forced to dish out business cards and do the yap. Doesn't work. It's counterproductive. Much better to ask interesting questions. And the other thing is that other people go away thinking, that was a really interesting person. All they did was ask me about myself. We love being asked about ourselves. It's a really powerful tactic. I think the other thing when you go to networking meetings is to go prepared and just pick out 1 or 2 people that you know you want to talk to. It's worth researching the meetings. It's worth finding out whether those people are going to be there or not, and just go specifically to talk to them. And if you really don't like that, you can cozy up to people on social media now in a really polite and interesting way and replace cold calling by just usefully commenting and talking to people on Twitter or Facebook or wherever you need to do that. So your network works in a different way. The other thing that's really powerful for quiet people, I think, is the notion of the network that's behind you on the timeline. Everybody I talk to wants new customers all the time. They want new business all the time. They completely forget that there's loads of good people left on the trail behind them. And it's worth just sitting down and going through all your databases and mind mapping out all of the contacts you've already got, all the people that you've had business from in the past, all of the gatekeepers, all of the influencers, all of the folk you know already, and then just drop a pebble in their pond. Use a nice email newsletter or whatever from time to time. Those folk will keep you nurtured. I'm sure you've heard of the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your turnover over the lifetime of your business comes from a core of 20% of your clients. And that 20% are the returners, the people that keep coming back. And I'll talk a little bit about how to connect with those folk, because those are the folk that keep your business alive. One thing you can do is think about stuff and share it. How many of you have come across the concept of thought leadership? I bet you all have, but you just haven't maybe recognized exactly what it is. But a thought leader notices stuff that's of interest to their niche or their client group, and they collect it together, and then they feed it out on their timeline, whichever timeline that is. And then every now and again, they put their own messages in there, and folk get to know them as a go-to place for really interesting information about that particular niche, whether it's ceramics or printmaking or digital technology or whatever. And any person can do this. You can just think about it, say, I want to collect information. I've been collecting information recently on introversion, because that's kind of a focus for me at the moment, looking for really interesting articles and then popping them out on Twitter, and then every now and again putting some of my own stuff in. It takes away that horrible salesy feel that you get in some of the social media feeds out there, and it places you as somebody that folk will keep coming back to find the interesting stuff without the bother of looking for it themselves. Interesting concept, thought leadership, and absolutely anybody can do it. I think also you need to use this in a selective way. It's about finding the place that you can really shine. What's your platform? It's got to be something that suits your internal values, and it's got to be something that matches up with your learning style. Because some of us are predominantly visual, aren't we? And some are auditory people. We like text, we like words, we like listening to podcasts. And some of us are kinesthetic people. We like kind of getting hold of stuff or doing things or attending workshops or, doing an activity in order to learn. So what's your learning style? What falls easily to hand? Which of the platforms really suits you in terms of a place that you can develop and shine? Because you can't do it all. You can't do it all. There's just so much of this stuff arriving on our doorstep all the time. And we're told if we're not on Twitter, we're not on Pinterest, we're not on Facebook, we're not on Vine, we're not on Instagram, we're not on Periscope, and I could go on and on and on, and it's terrible pressure, to explore all of these things and try and do some or all of them. You can't do it. There's not enough time in the day. So which ones really suit you? Which ones match up with your values and your clients' values? So it may be that you're in the small minority that likes going out and doing talks and seminars and workshops. How many of you like public speaking? It's the number one fear, isn't it? In some cultures, it's the number one fear. It's ranked above death, fear of death. I'm being serious. Look at the research. We don't like doing this, but maybe if you don't like doing talks, you're happy sitting with a group of people and doing a small seminar, or you like running workshops and skill sharing. But if you don't like that, you might be better off in the world of social media being a thought leader. If you don't like that, maybe there's a book in you. How many of you think you've got a book in you? Yeah, okay. So easy to do now. If you work on a Mac, you've got the iAuthor app, and you can write fantastic ebooks, illustrated ebooks, and publish them up to the iTunes publishing platform straight off your Mac. If you've got a Word document that's a book, you can be on Kindle and earning money within 48 hours. The world's just changed radically. Or you can run e-courses or webinars. So it's about I'm sure you can see where I'm going here, but it's about finding the place that you can really put your stamp on, that you can really shine, and allowing yourselves to let the other stuff drift into the background. Maybe just do a few little bits of it. I go on Instagram from time to time. It doesn't really appeal to me. I spend most of my life on Twitter. Interesting. So, another exercise that I do with people is just getting them to get a big sheet of paper and very simply map out the things that they're good at, the places that appeal to them. And it might be a little selection like this, talking about your work, running some show and tell workshops, doing a bit of writing and blogging, and sharing stuff on social media. But for goodness sake, keep it simple. Okay, so the next question that I'm going to throw at you is this. How big is your world? What I mean by this is, where in the world do you want your voice to be heard? Where do you want to be found? Is it local? Is it regional? Is it national? Is it global? Is it interplanetary? You know, I say that, but there's folk designing stuff that's going off on rocket ships to Mars and Venus, and it's folk like you and me that have designed and made and built and created the stuff that's on that. It's not an unreasonable ambition to want your stuff to be global if that's what's appropriate. So it's about thinking where your voice is going to be heard. It's about thinking where your customers really are. And it's about thinking maybe about the places that you want to go and travel and connect with other people, or research what you want to do, or go and see the things that you need to see to give you the fuel that you need to sustain your business. It's another kind of interesting exercise that I recommend. But whatever you do, I think it's important to understand the geography of your business. Have you thought about the geography? Have any of you ever taken a regional map and plotted out an hour and a half's drive time on it, or whatever the drive time you're comfortable with, or the travel time is you're comfortable with in your business, and just seeing what all the population centres are and using that to begin to get a clue as to where all the customers are? Mapping out the geography of your business is really a valuable thing to do. Not only because you know where they are, but also you can work out whether there's the critical mass of customers within that area in order to sustain you. I know some businesses, little businesses in rural Derbyshire, that sell stuff all over the world. You know, they're constantly shipping stuff out, tiny businesses. But in the time that I've been in Loughborough, 6 or 7 people have tried to open contemporary art galleries, contemporary craft galleries in Loughborough. And as soon as their capital went, the businesses closed. And the reason for that was they hadn't done the maths. They hadn't figured out whether there were enough people in Loughborough on any given day wanting to buy contemporary craft with the money in their wallet to sustain the business. So knowing the geography of your business, understanding that stuff about critical mass of customers and where they are is really vital. And I think it's important to test the market as well. It's one of the big mistakes that I find, and this especially applies to quiet people because they often struggle with the courage to do this, is to somehow test your product before you start the business or before you start a new development. You wouldn't believe the number of people I know that start businesses without talking to a single potential customer before they've put the website up and invested money in it. It's astonishing. The best businesses work out the product market fit first, well in advance of doing any new stuff. You need to get out there and test whether it's what people really, really want. The big thing with creative people is they have this urge to do what they love without really checking that what they love and what the customers really want actually marry up in a meaningful way. Interesting stuff. So testing the market. I don't know whether some of you may be familiar with this thing about minimum viable product. But a minimum viable product is something that you can make or do or create for a small amount of money and put out there and test. Test in all sorts of different ways to see what response you get to it before you start investing in it, before you start rolling it out. How many of you like Green and Black's chocolate? You know Green and Black's chocolate? You know those tiny little bars? Yeah? You ever had one of those? They're not retail products. Those are market tests. Green and Blacks, whenever they're testing new flavors, create loads of little bars and put them in packs, and they send them out to geographically specific areas in the country, and they measure the sales, they measure the feedback. When they've had the feedback, they pick the flavors that were most liked, and they make the medium-sized bars, and they put those out all over the place, and they measure the feedback and the sales on those, and then and only then do they produce the full-size bars and put them out to market. And that's an ideal example of minimum viable product testing. But we can all do something like that, whether it's creating a web page about a new product and tweeting a link out to it and having an email sign-up box on the page and see how many people sign up for the information. You can do that before you even create the product, just to test the market. Vital for a sustainable business. And of course, if that works, people will start to buy at the testing stage. They'll tell you whether it's good or not, and you can go forward with confidence to the next stage. Interesting. the next thing I want to talk about, to me, is probably the most important part of sustaining any business, but especially a creative business. And it comes back to this sense of being different and your non-conformity and having something to share that's really unique to you, whatever that is. And it's the sense of what your business and personal values are. What's really at the core of you? What is it that you want people to love about what you do? And if you can encapsulate those values and put them out there, whether it's through your About Me page on your website, or through the copy on your website, or through a cracking video, actually is a good way to do it. The values are the things that your customer keys into, and it's the thing that keeps them coming back. Your customers will align themselves with your company values, whatever those are. And then you just simply need to find those people that share those values. So shouting about your stuff, and we all know this, doesn't work. How many times do you unsubscribe from email newsletters because they're just kind of shouting at you all the time? How irate do you get with people phoning you up, trying to flog you stuff, and it's clear that they have no clue what your business is about, let alone what your business values are. And if you can kind of hone this down, that's a real key to being successful with your business. So if you think about it, if you meet somebody whose values you resonate with, what you get from that is a sense of empathy. And with the empathy, over time comes trust. And with the trust builds loyalty. And with the loyalty, you get the repeat custom. And if you follow that cycle round and round and keep building the values and the trust and the empathy and the loyalty, inevitably that leads to a bunch of customers, your core 20% or so, that will sustain the business. So being clear about your values and drivers is key, really. It's all about relationships. I mean, I've read more marketing books than it's probably healthy for a person to read in their lifetime. But to me, it all boils down to it's all about relationships. It's about getting people to the point of saying yes to your proposition, whether that's a sale or a desire to collaborate or work together with them in some way. The values are at the core of it. Collaboration, I think, is also key. There's loads of research been done recently on business models that are sustainable, and almost all of them are beginning to kind of focus in around companies working with each other rather than directly competing with each other. Businesses staying close to each other and finding ways of working together. Because those kind of joint values, ventures add value. Just to give a couple of examples. There was an illustrator that I worked with a couple of years ago who did very well from his illustration work. He did wildlife, nature illustrations, did very well from it. But he kind of got the idea that he wanted to push it up a gear. And he got in touch with a local wildlife interpretation centre that had a little gallery, and went to them and said, can I do a show of my illustration work in your little gallery because you're a nature interpretation centre and you've got an audience for that? And they said, yeah, that sounds good, but why don't we contact the RSPB and ask them if they want, because we're sponsored by them, why don't we get them in and the three of us work together? And what happened was he got his show with the benefit of 3 huge mailing lists, his own, the interpretation centres, and the RSPB. And the show was just completely filled. He sold most of the stuff that was on there. And all of those people got real benefits out of that coming together and those values coming together and the desire to do something together. Does that make sense? You know, another woman I knew was ran a string quartet and was struggling to get gigs. And then she matched herself up with a wedding planning company. And together they made a successful co-promotion and really went a long way with that. There's always somebody out there that you can collaborate with. And you really mustn't be scared about getting close with the people that you consider to be your competitors. It's what I call shoe shop theory. You know, if you wanted a pair of shoes, you wouldn't go out to a shoe shop in the middle of nowhere. You'd go into a town centre where there were lots of shoe shops all together in the knowledge that you'd find something that you really wanted. And the shoe retailers know that as well. That's why they're all together in the same place, because they know they're going to buy from one or other of those shops, and eventually everybody gets a share. It's interesting stuff, just thinking about collaboration versus competition. Who are your radiators and drains? This is really important. I don't know whether you've come across this idea. I'm sure most of you have. But you need to find who your radiators are, the people that exude a natural energy for what you want to do and what you want to achieve, and that support you with that. And stay away from the drains, the people who say, it'll never happen. Where are you going to get the money to do that? Why don't you go and marry a lawyer? Friendship is really important. We're all out there. Sorry, are you a lawyer? No. I always put my foot in it with something like these. You really need to stay with the warm people and kind of get away from those folk that really bring you down. It's key to surviving, and especially if you're kind of a quiet, reticent sort of person, you need to be with people that are going to buoy you up all the time. Aim high. Most of the people I meet are held back not by the quality of their work, but by the quality of their courage and ambition. Most of you will all be doing work of quality, and the thing that might be holding you back is the way that you push yourself forward with that. And I'm not talking about setting off like a rocket. It may be simply that you need to work in a very sustained and organized small step way to do this. But without the big goals, without aiming really high, without defining those things, it's hard to move forward in a planned way. You've got to have a strategy, really. This is the way that I think about it. What's on your dream list? This is a good one to do at home. What's on your dream list? And I don't mean your bucket list. I don't mean jumping out of a plane or parachuting down the Grand Canyon or whatever. Can you parachute down the Grand? I guess you could. Make a list of the blue chip clients that you really want to work with. Make a list of the galleries that you really want to exhibit in. Make a list of the magazines you want your stuff to appear in, or the radio programs, or if you're a craftsperson, you might want your work in the V&A. If you're a journalist, you might want your work in the Sunday supplements. But for goodness sake, make the list and then systematically start working towards it. A couple of young men that I worked with at the business incubator in Lincoln University, when I first worked with them, it was probably about 8 years ago now, one of them said that his ambition was to travel around the world and interview all the last surviving pilots from Bomber Command, World War II Bomber Command, and make a film about it. And his business partner wanted to create animations and get them in all the animations festivals. What they did was they created the dream list, and they worked together, and the film has now been bought by Channel 4, and Neil's doing the animation festivals. But without setting out the goal and working systematically towards it, I don't know whether they actually ever have got there. There's two elements to this that I'm just about to explain. Firstly is you need to say it out loud. I find that it's really valuable. If you've got something in your head, you want to do it, tell other people about it. It's almost as if telling other people cements it as a goal, and you're more compelled to do something with it if you've spoken to other folk about it. And be accountable. Tell it to somebody else that will give you feedback on your progress. You never know who's sitting beside you. That's the other thing. And it's a really useful tool for quiet people is to really capitalize on the fact that the person that could unlock everything for you may well be sitting beside you at some point on your travels, literally. The Christmas before last, I went for some coaching myself, because as a business coach, you need to be supervised. You need to be properly coached by other people. And she said to me, Pete, what are your big goals? What would you really like to do, before you shuffle off this mortal coil? And I said, well, I really fancy doing a TED talk. And she said, I organize them. Now, I'd known this person for years. I didn't know that she did that. And it was only through expressing what I really, really wanted to do to another warm, human, cuddly being that door opened. You absolutely need to tell people about your hopes and dreams, Otherwise, you might miss real opportunities. So the whole thing about the dream list is this. You work through the dream list stage by stage. Often what stops you is less to do with the quality of your work than the quality of your courage. Find somebody to hold you to be accountable. Why is it so difficult to do this? Well, we're actually hardwired to avoid danger and avoid risk. There's a bit at the top of your brainstem, the reptilian brain, that's responsible for all of your autonomic systems, for making sure you stand up, making sure you breathe, making sure you digest your food, all the rest of it. But that small part of your brain is also responsible for the flight or fight mechanism. Now, we only think of flight or fight at its most extreme. You know, I'm just about to be eaten by a Tyrannosaurus Rex, I'd better leg it out of here. Actually, it works at very, very low level all of the time. So every time you go to do something risky, it could just be a business development or going to write the book or whatever, that thing kicks in and it says, that's risky, you've not done that before, don't go there. And so we stop ourselves. And actually, it's part of our inbuilt psychology that's stopping us. You need to tiptoe around it. And the way you tiptoe around it is this, to find somebody else to work with, to give you continual feedback so you get over that hump of your psychology stopping in your tracks. So it's about overcoming the resistance and challenging yourself. A lot of coaches will push you to create these things here, big, fat, audacious goals. I'm sure some of you have seen this on coaching websites. To me, this is important, but actually this is the more important thing. How do I get there? Some folk get there through massive action. I'm sure you've met people that will say, I'm going to redesign my website, I'm going to start on Friday evening and it will be launched by Monday morning. And they do that. That's the way they operate. Good on them. I can't do that. I do the baby step stuff. I think, where do I want to go? Let's break it down into little chunks, one a day, and we'll get there in the end. I am the tortoise in the Hare and the Tortoise fable, you know. But it's really important to know the way you operate. These things will change throughout your life. It's the slow, kind of steady progress that's more important than any single big goal. Your life is constantly an emerging strategy, isn't it? What you think is right, 1 month becomes different the next. This is probably the most successful tactic I've ever used in my business career, is writing a cheeky letter. So going back to the juggler, I was okay at the juggling. I was all right on the stilts and not bad on the unicycle, but I couldn't get that show to work. It just wasn't gelling. And somebody had given me the business card of a company in the States, National Circus Project, that did in fact do what I was aspiring to do. And I went home and I put the card on my bookshelf. And I did nothing about it. I didn't really go in. I didn't understand why the person had given it to me. I just parked it there. And one night when I was feeling particularly frustrated, I'd been out down the pub and I'd had about 3 pints of Marston's Pedigree. And I wandered in and I found the card and I went, that's why they gave me the card. Help. This is where help comes from. I sat down, I wrote them a letter, writing pad, pen, pre-internet, you know. And while I was still enhanced in my mind by the 3 pints of Marston's Pedigree, I put it in an envelope and stuck a stamp on it and put it in the letterbox. 10 days later, I was having my Sunday lunch and the phone rang and it was the director of the company in New York. And he said, if you can get over here, we'll teach you everything you want to know. We'll show you how to market it and how to make a real success of this, because we've been doing it for years. And I wheedled 750 quid out of the Arts Council and went to New York and started a 7-year relationship of going backwards and forwards and performing in the States as well. I told you I was a business editor for Craft and Design magazine. Again, I'd written an article for the British Artist Blacksmithing magazine, just one article. And I got it back and I looked at it and I thought, well, I kind of like my name in print. Who doesn't? And I thought, who can I send this to? And I'd been reading Craft and Design magazine for a while and thought, I'll send it to them. So I sent them a copy of the article and said, would you like one like this? And they looked at it and they said, yeah, go on, try it. Write one for us. And I wrote them one and I wrote them another. And that went on for a year. And then they said to me, why don't you join the team? And I was then business editor of Craft and Design magazine. because of a cheeky letter. Who could you write a cheeky letter to today? Interesting. Who could help you right now? You need to nurture the ability to tell your story in a compelling way, or find somebody who can help you with this. A lot of creative people struggle with the written word, I find. If you can't write, find somebody to help you with it. That's why writers have editors. There are certain words in the English lexicon that I simply cannot spell. So I've got an editor that helps me with it. And when my editor doesn't help me with it, my partner helps me with it. Everybody needs help doing stuff, So finding somebody that can help you hone your story, whether it's in words or through video or through blogging or through 140 characters on social media, you need to be able to tell your story really well. It's a vital part of the process. As a creative person, you occupy the position of being one of the most interesting, absorbing, and fascinating people on the planet. Who believes that? You need to really, going back to the stuff about expertise, you need to believe in yourself. You need to believe that you've got a really high quality story to tell people, because it's a story that will connect you with others. That values thing creates the thump in your chest. People read a good story, or they see some compelling copy or a really nice video about what you do. That's what happens. You connect with folk, and it's that connection that will sustain you. Your audience is waiting. Tell your story and tell it well. Thank you. Oh yeah, you need your mic.
Yeah, I'm not cool enough to have a headset. That's the problem. So I'm going to grab some chairs, because this is the part where we pretend to be on a chat show, I'm afraid. So if you don't mind, I'd rather sit down than kind of awkwardly stand around shuffling. So, by the way, that was fantastic. Can we just give another round of applause for Pete? I thought that was fantastic. We're just going to have a quick chat just to kind of settle on some of the things you talked about, basically. Yeah. I've got a couple of questions, but I also just want to open it up to everyone just to fire questions, and then after that we'll go upstairs and have some food and drink and that kind of stuff. But first of all, I'm quite interested to know if do you still class yourself as quiet and an introvert yourself?
Yes.
There's a second part of this.
I'm going to explain this. People, it comes back to this thing about where can you shine. Now, for some reason, although I'm a really quiet person, I can stand on a stage and talk to hundreds of people. It doesn't bother, well, it doesn't, I get scared by it, but it doesn't bother me. I've become familiar with the fears. If you put me on the corner of a table at a dinner party, I just go like solid. I can't, it doesn't flow, and we've all got places where we flow and places where we don't. Like most introverts, I keep my phone switched on to answer, because I hate getting the shock of a sudden phone call coming in while I'm in flow doing my work. We all have that place, I think, where you can do stuff, and others where you can't.
It just makes it very interesting. That I would have loved to have seen your juggling show. If you're saying that you're a kind of you're well versed in understanding the kind of quiet nature of being creativity and of being a creative and being an introvert, and yet you started being on stilts. I would have loved to have seen that show, that kind of introverting, juggling, stilting man. So I just find it really weird that there's a parallel between this person that you started out as something that's very, you couldn't be more extrovert, a juggling person on stilts. I mean, and then to have this deep understanding and be able to then coach people and really just identify with being quiet and introverted. But
I think it's a bit of it's a misclassification to say that introverts are only ever quiet. We're all on this continuum through introversion, there are lots of people that are ambiverts. They have a mix of qualities of both ends of the spectrum. And then there's the kind of shouty extroverts at the other end of the scale. But some folk are a mix of various bits and pieces on that spectrum.
I might be massively simplifying the idea of some of the subjects you raised, but do you think a lot of the topics in your book are more appropriate for like a British audience? Do you think the sense of finding it difficult to effortlessly shout about yourself and your qualities is a British thing?
No.
Right. I was. Fine. Next question.
I'm just wondering how many people in the room have heard of Susan Cain and the book Quiet. Yeah. Okay, the book Quiet, if you're introverted, you need to look at the book Quiet, because it's the power of introverts in a world that can't stop talking. And she's built a huge business around that, which kind of proves that it's not just UK. She started what she calls a quiet revolution, and most of her work now is about training quiet people in leadership skills, because the world has recognized that sometimes the best leaders are not the noisiest people, they're not the ones that lead from the front. They're talking too much to think straight, frankly, in a lot of cases. And all of her work is about exploring the power of introversion and the fact that introverts and quiet people, and often shy people, are very, very deep thinkers. Yeah, it's like Stephen Hawking quote, that quiet people have the loudest minds. That's a really nice quote, I think.
There definitely seems to be a bit of I suppose when social media and Twitter in particular becomes such a major part, the fabric of the way a lot of us talk, it's a platform for people who would hide behind a Twitter profile more than ever, who would never go up to someone and say, I do this, you need to buy it from me, but are quite happy to do that over text on a Twitter timeline. Do you still think that you should encourage people to do both, or is it just fine to be the person that promotes themselves just behind a computer screen, or do you think people should have like a face-to-face element in their business too?
I think if you've got it in you to do face-to-face stuff, public speaking, talking to folk, doing webinars where folk can see your face, doing video pieces where folk can see your face, that's the most powerful connector on earth, because people really grasp who you are. They get a sense of your values. They really connect with that. If you're just doing the Twitter thing without doing the other things, you may be losing out and stuff. But the big question for me is, are you doing that thing about getting out into your stretch zone and exploring the other stuff? Or is your fear holding you back from that? And the Twitter then just becomes a diversion from tackling the hard stuff. Because you do need to tackle the hard stuff. If you find that you're never going to be a good public speaker, you may find that running webinars is just as effective a way of getting yourself and your values across to a big audience. I mean, I did a webinar the other night for the Design Trust, which is based in London, but the audience were people in the Western Isles of Scotland and Orkney and Shetland. And there were some people I was talking to that were the only person on the island they lived on. And it's a fantastic way to connect with people. It's a bit like doing a late night radio show. Well, it was between 8 and 9 at night. And we did one that was logged into internationally, and I sold books to people in Australia and Canada and Holland and South Africa just from a 40-minute webinar. Yeah, you've got all this huge range of things at your disposal to connect with people instantaneously. If you're not using them to the best, if you're not finding the place you can shine, you're missing out and stuff. Do you remember when the airliner came down in the Hudson River years ago? That was on the news in New Zealand before the emergency services had arrived at the scene, because somebody up on a bridge took a photograph and tweeted it. And it was that point I went, I'm a quiet person, but by God, isn't that just a powerful way to connect with people all over the place? That's why I love Twitter.
So, if there's any questions, by the way, if anyone has any kind of questions, doesn't even have to be questions. It could be comments, stories, things you want to add to anything that's been raised. Is there anything else that anyone wants to say?
I'll make a comment. It was a fantastic talk.
Thank you.
Do you think there's a coloration?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
It is now.
Thank you. Between you use introvert and extrovert quite a lot. And it's like that spectrum.
Yeah.
A lot of what you were saying seems like you're talking about like nice people, like people I want to be friends with, people I'm interested in what they're going to say, and just dicks. Is there a correlation, do you think, with that? Or am I just being really judgmental and horrible?
You need to read the chapter entitled Dicks. It's not, honestly.
You know,
I'm sorry.
I think there are nasty people right across the whole spectrum, and I think there are fantastic people right across the whole spectrum. I'm not saying that introverts are all the nice people. You know, clearly that doesn't work. I do. You know, have you ever been in a place, a quiet place, just thinking and writing or working on your tablet or something like that, and somebody comes along and starts going on their mobile phone or whatever? That's the thing that drives me nuts. It's the failure to respect that just because somebody's sitting quietly doesn't mean there's nothing going on in their head, you know. And I kind of tackle that thinking a lot in the book. And if you keep getting interrupted, you know, I go away several times a year. I take myself on short retreats to quiet places, and that's where I get most of my thinking and writing done, because it's just impossible in a busy environment to do that truly creative stuff.
There was, yep.
Sorry, I've got spots in front of my eyes.
Okay. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this anyway, but I've just finished reading your book.
Oh.
And it was a great read. You know, there's so many bits in it where I've read it and I thought, yeah, that's me. You're talking about me there, which is really good. And I particularly like the bit about where you touch on being called out as a fraud.
Yes.
You know, because that kind of really resonates. And then I was thinking about it, and I follow lots of people on Twitter and social media that I look up to. You know, so you're constantly in this learning phase and feeling that you're at the bottom of the
Yeah.
you know, like that. But I've done more and more public speaking, and I talk at Trent Uni and things like that now.
Yeah.
I think suddenly moving out of your group, out of your circle, and talking to a different group does lots to boost your confidence. That actually, I do know loads more than a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's worked for me.
Yeah. I think the imposter syndrome that you describe, which is that fear of being found out, you know, the fear of being caught out, or the fear that you go out to talk to a group of people and actually they're all going to be more expert than you are, is completely normal. Every time I come and do a talk, I'm thinking, what are the audience going to be like? Are they going to ask any awkward questions? There's bound to be half of them that are brainier than me, you know. You just have to kind of learn to live with it and strategize around that, because folk are folk. You know, they'll give you a good listening to if you want it.
The other thing is the internet is a big place. You know, so there's like names of people I follow, and I just assume everybody knows those people and knows what they're talking about and the rest of it. And then even talking to other creatives and other designers, find out they know even better.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. There's more information in the world than any of us can get our heads around, and it's growing all the time, you know. That's why you need to be selective. I mean, the advice I always give to people when they join a social media stream is to join up with it and do nothing. Observe, just observe what other people are doing. Follow people that are in your niche. Follow people that you want to connect with. Do nothing, just watch how they behave. Watch out for the best behavior, the best practice. And once you've got your head around what the best practice is in your niche, then start doing stuff. But it's a mistake to dive in there too soon until you get the feel of your audience and start building one up for yourself.
There was a thing I read that resonated with me. Same bit as you, probably, the bit about feeling like a fraud, which I felt for years and years. You know, it comes and it kind of appears every now and again in certain scenarios, especially when you're at a big event or something like that, where all these people are much better than me at this. And then I listened to a podcast a few weeks ago with Paddy Considine, you know, the famous actor, the guy that's in loads of cool films. And he was talking quite candidly about that too. And he said he was presenting it as an idea as if he probably hadn't heard of the imposter syndrome or whatever like that. He was just presenting it as something he felt that when he goes on set, this Hollywood actor feels exactly the same thing as someone who's in a back bedroom crafting an art form they've just got into or something. So it's not just restricted to where you are. It's just everyone's probably going to get it. It just, you need to kind of it's only relevant to you. No one else sees it. That's the thing that I kind of took from the book, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that's right. A lot of us work as sole traders in the creative industries, and it's easy to become disconnected and quite isolated, and you believe everybody else is doing just fine, and it's just you that's suffering. And that's really not true. You know, we're all largely speaking in the same boat, suffering from the effects of the same storms out there. Yeah.
Any more comments, questions? That's a no.
Oh.
Well, anyway, if you do think of something and you raise it, the perfect place for that is now upstairs with some sandwiches and brownies. And are you going to stick around with us for a bit?
Of course.
Yeah, that'd be cool. So that kind of concludes this part of it. Thank you so much for joining us here. And just very quickly want to thank sponsors again, Jigsaw24, who are at the back, and Affinity and Fat Free Media. So thank you to them for making this happen. And if you like the event, please tweet Glitch Event or wherever you want to write it on a piece of paper and throw it at someone. Just say nice things. That's my version of a hashtag. Yeah, that's very anti-social media. But I expect lots of pieces of paper flying around upstairs. Can we just get one last round of applause for Pete? Thank you all very much for coming. Thanks, Pete.
Yep.
And we'll see you all upstairs.
Yeah. If anybody just wants to pick one of these up and have a quick look, there's some copies down here, and do feel free to thumb through them.
Very much.
Okay.